sound.
Everybody, welcome to National Storytellers Night. Before we get started, we've got 4 people in our live studio audience, or live Zoom audience, I should say. And hey, if you want to be a part of the live Zoom audience, all you have to do is go over to newwritermedia.com and sign up, and it's free. Besides that, you can also, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, be sure to like and subscribe. And make sure you come in, because this room is big enough for 100 people, so there's more than enough room. You guys can all come in and be a part of the audience. Today I'm very excited about this. We've gotten a couple of different photographers here, and this time we got someone who's really comes from a different part of journalism, which is from photojournalism. She is actually on the editorial staff of the Houston Chronicle, and does videos, and is a video photojournalist for editorials, which is way different than you normally see. So please help me welcome Sharon Steinmann. How are you doing? Sharon?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a minute, and so we're gonna share a screen here, because it's a Zoom. So, and we're gonna show some photographs here. So tell me, how did you get started in photojournalism?
I was in college. I went to college for anthropology, but when I was a senior, I guess it was when I was a senior, I wanted to, I just really I took like a documentary photography class, which was in the architecture department at my school. And then I just loved it so much. And there really wasn't a visual anthropology component at my school. And if there had been, I may have just continued with anthropology and done visual anthropology. But I just, in talking to my professor, he knew someone at a newspaper, the Fairfield paper in California, and he just helped me get an internship. And I just kind of went in blind. I had no journalism background.
So going in blind, what were you expecting when you got to the paper, your first internship?
God, that was a long time ago. I just want to tell stories. So I was always like finding photo essays. I really wasn't into like breaking news or sports or anything like that. But of course I got all that. And I didn't have the journalism experience. I really did have to learn with failure. And luckily it was unpaid, so they weren't angry. I failed.
So what was some of your biggest failures then?
I don't know. I probably was pretty bad at like sports or anything that moved quickly. I mean, I didn't have like great equipment, and it was back in film days too.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a lot of like taking photographs and then hoping that you get what you
exactly
get something when you get
yes. So yeah. And then after that, then I just kept doing it. Like I did a year-long internship in Washington State at the Tri-City News, I think it was called, in Eastern Washington. And that was really cool. And I was paid, and they paid for my lodging. It was great. And then I got my first staff job at the Appeal Democrat in Marysville, California. And then I just kept working at newspapers.
Now you have an interesting background that I'm sure a lot of other photographers who are watching this can sympathize with you. You've actually been laid off several times.
Yes. So yeah, in my 20 plus year career, I've been laid off 3 times. And either I'm an idiot or very determined. I kept going.
Well, sometimes it's hard to tell with photographers.
I took a break, like a 3-year break, and did PR, media relations for a government agency. But other than that, I stuck with photojournalism.
So some of the photographs that have here, you actually spent some time not in the United States, but outside of the United States. Where were some of the places that you went to?
Well, I'm so glad I did anthropology as an undergrad because I studied abroad and I learned Spanish. So when I finally did make it, well, even at the Appeal Democrat, I went on an assignment in Mexico once. I went down with like a missionary group. But then when I moved to Dallas I went to go work for Al Dia, which was the launch of the Spanish language newspaper, the Dallas Morning News. That was like, I was going to Latin America all the time. So this is one story that a writer and we got a grant to do a story on HIV. And we chose Honduras because it was that epicenter of Latin America. They were having an epidemic. I guess this was in 2003, I guess. We went there. So this is a woman that I met in oh my God, what town was that? There's not Tegucigalpa, but the other one, San Pedro Sula. And she was a sex worker who was HIV positive, but still working because there was nothing else for her to do. And that's her with a client. And that was a lot of trust building. And in this particular case, the writer and we traveled separately because I knew that I'd have better access without a male writer. So then once I met her and spent time with her, then he met her and spent time with her.
So being in a different country and doing this stuff on your own, is there anything that you wish you'd done differently?
Oh yeah. I definitely, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have traveled by myself. I mean, Honduras is a very dangerous place, especially for everyone, people that live there. And we wonder why there's so many Honduran immigrants in the US and a lot of people are leaving gang violence. I mean, it's very gang ridden, a very scary place. And I was very lucky that nothing
Now,
happened to me.
let's go back to this photograph that we have up here because you said that it's actually with a client.
Yeah.
How do you get that access? Because that's some good access that you were able to get to.
You always ask. That's the thing. Like that's a good lesson actually. When in doubt, always ask. Because you never know. It should be up to your subject to make the decision, not you.
And she wasn't bothered by that, or he would like any of the
Neither
clients.
of them were. And
Wow.
I didn't stay the whole time. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I did say I would just stay for a couple minutes and leave the room, and I did.
So before anything actually got going, you
Yes,
like,
yes,
okay,
I left. Yeah,
time to leave and get out of
yes,
there.
and honor your promises. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Now, what do you look for in a moment when you're out there taking these photographs? What is the thing that you look for?
Well, in her case, like she just was struggling to survive. You know, and her youngest, the older baby, the toddler was born HIV positive. Because the healthcare there was not very good, and she didn't know, you know, that she could transmit it. But the younger baby here was born without HIV because by that time she had him, she knew. Um, she had more information. Anyway, this is from Al Dia as well. This was we had a string of I guess paleteros, people that sell ice creams like popsicles. There
Oh,
were like
really?
a string of murders, like undocumented immigrants. A lot of them were selling popsicles, and I guess they were an easy target. So several of them were being murdered around the city.
This is where again?
In Dallas.
In Dallas. Okay.
Yeah. So this is his widow and family. And then from Dallas, happened to go to an NHJ conference, which is a Hispanic journalist conference. I met the DOP at the Chronicle, and that was in 2005. And I ended up going there as a photojournalist. And this is Hurricane Rita. I feel like this is what's happening right now, or what happened last week in Houston. Houston is just a city of storms.
Remind me not to go down
Not
there.
and not much has changed. Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is east, like Beaumont area, I guess. Like maybe more like Orange in East Texas or
Okay.
east of Houston, and people were without power, so they were bathing in the rivers.
Now, between the Dallas Morning News and the Houston Chronicle, didn't you work in other places as well?
No, I went straight from Dallas to the Chronicle, and then I actually, in the height of the recession, 2009, I got laid off at the Chronicle. And that's when I went to Alabama and freelanced there. I spent about a year in Alabama. And then I went to Venezuela for like 2.5 years and freelanced. So we're getting there.
Now,
But
like, let's talk about the differences between working for a newspaper and freelancing. Like,
definitely hustling, yes.
mhm.
Learning how to be a business person and having another side hustle. I mean, I just don't know a lot of editorial photographers that only survive doing photojournalism. I think they're not going to tell you what the other things that they do, but I shot weddings. But I think almost everybody does something else. They just don't talk about it, especially now.
Mhm.
So this is just weather, strange, freaky weather, snowing in Houston.
That was what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
This was in 2006 or something.
Oh, really?
Because
Okay.
so I've been at the Houston Chronicle twice. So the first
Right.
time I was a news photographer,
Hmm.
and then I left for 10 years. Now I came back now in my new role. So I'm not in the photo department anymore. And then this is from Alabama, freelancing for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And juveniles in Mississippi were being incarcerated in juvenile halls, like as young as like 8 years old. Like I think I met like an 8-year-old in this Biloxi facility. And that stopped. The SPLC got involved and stopped that. So then once I went to Venezuela, I covered the last election campaign of Hugo Chavez when he had cancer. And that's him with his daughter. That's on the campaign. And then he won the election. This is during voting, so they didn't know he had won yet. But the next one I think is a jubilation picture.
Now, again, like something like this, like what do you do to get into that position? How do you get to the
This was
position?
very difficult. Like I spent a lot of time pitching to so many different organizations when I was in Venezuela. And I just had a hard time breaking in. There were already people there that already had, like the New York Times was not hiring other people. They already had their people. AP already had their staff at the time when I was there, which was 2010, 2011, all the agencies, Reuters, AP, they all had like full staffs in Venezuela. From what I understand now, they don't have them at all, or they maybe have just like native people, just a couple, because it's just really difficult for any foreigners to live there now.
So how did you survive when you were down there?
Well, I survived because I was in a relationship with somebody who was working for Dow Jones. So otherwise, I don't think I could have. It was really hard to break into freelancing there. I mean, this was for AP. I did cover the election for AP. And also, it was very dangerous. Like you had to have a bodyguard with you. So every photographer was given a bodyguard who had a motorcycle, and they would drive you around the city and watch your back. And I remember they had sent a really famous, I won't say his name, a really, really famous photographer at the AP has won multiple Pulitzers, was sent from another country in Latin America to cover this election. And I was hired in the country. And he was robbed of all his cameras like the first day he was there.
That's scary.
Yeah.
And I can imagine being in something like this, that's a high conflict area.
It's not
Um,
really conflict. It's not like they don't have gang violence, but they just have a lot of disparity. So there's a lot of crime and not a lot of policing, or not a lot of honest policing,
right.
I should say. Yeah, so it's not the same as Honduras. You're not going to get caught in like gang warfare, but it's just very dangerous. Like in Caracas, living there, even now, you cannot talk on your cell phone on the street. Because if you
Me,
do, someone will come and put a gun at your head and take your phone.
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So you just learn to adapt. You don't wear jewelry. You just don't show off. Try to blend in.
And then
And this is what
how do you hide your cameras?
you
Because
have to, well, you have to have either I would carry just like an old backpack and stick my cameras in, and I wouldn't take them out until I got to where I was photographing something.
Mhm.
Yeah, when I was by myself. And then
Right.
when you're covering like a high profile thing, where out and about and you're in crowds of people, you really have to have someone with you. Like you hire a motorcycle guy.
And that eats into your costs as well.
Yeah, I didn't have to pay for that with AP. They provided that because that's like a necessity. Like you cannot work without that person.
But then when with assignments when you weren't working for AP,
Then I wouldn't go on assignments where I would get
uh
robbed. Yeah,
yeah.
or I would carry my stuff in like the old backpack and like luckily I look like I could be I don't look like an obvious gringa and
Hmm.
I spoke Spanish, so
So you
it was,
blended in.
yeah, it was a little easier for me. But if you don't speak the language or you look obviously like you're not from there, it's going to be much harder. And he won. And also, Venezuela is like a beauty capital. They've won more Miss Universe than any other country. So they have several beauty schools, like where you learn to be a beauty queen. So I did
And
a
this
story for that.
and this goes back to finding that moment, like finding that
Yes.
moment and not just finding the moment, but finding the frame for the moment.
Yes. And this, I think, sold to BBC for their stories. And that was one of my best clients, actually, the BBC. So you have to be creative and find different. I just couldn't get in with a lot of the American agencies. And then from there, I went back to the US. I was broke and I needed a job. And I got a job at AL.com, which based in Mobile. So the Alabama newspaper group.
Mhm.
And spent 3 years there being a staff photographer. And that was probably my favorite, that of all times, one of my favorite photojournalism jobs, if not my favorite, because there were so many good stories like this one. This was the Prancing Elites, and they ended up having a reality show on Oxygen, largely because of this story, because they were sort of undiscovered when I got there. And I started to do a story on them, and some reality producers in Los Angeles saw it and put them on a reality show.
So did they pull you in on any of that or
No, because then Oxygen was like, no, you can't. They had to like sign with Oxygen. So then I was like shut out. Then I became just like another photographer trying to photograph them.
oh, that I mean that goes back to talking about access, that you have the access beforehand and then like they go famous and you don't have the access anymore.
Yeah, but it's more interesting before they were famous because they were really discriminated in Alabama, as you can see. Like people were like would gape at them and were just sort of surprised. I mean, people in Alabama at that time, this was 2013, were not comfortable with LGBTQ people anyway, and definitely not people that were trans or non-gender conforming. So people, they went to this one parade they were invited to go to, and the parade organizers didn't know who they were. So they showed up as they normally would, and they got heckled and screamed at, and people were like treating them horribly. They had to leave the parade. The parade organizers were afraid they were going to get attacked. And that's what made them go viral. So I happened to be there because I was covering this story, and this parade went viral like all over the country, mostly because of the reactions of the
And that,
people.
and that's another thing part about being a photojournalist is it's not just the subject, but sometimes it's the reaction to the subject.
Yes, and they were not welcome. They were not welcome anywhere in Alabama. I mean, there was a group in Mobile that was very more progressive, like this club. This is a gay club in Mobile, where they were accepted. But outside of that, not at all. And I feel like when they did get that Oxygen contract, that was like vindication for them, and really broke them out of poverty. All of them were living in poverty and struggling, and that was life-changing for them. Again, this is the club in Mobile, so of course they look accepted here. But yeah, that was great, and that was my first foray into real video. Like I had done video at the Chronicle, news video with a consumer video camera because it was that long ago when our SLRs didn't shoot video. But this, I really, we actually had SLRs that could shoot video, and I did video, and this was nominated for a regional Emmy. This video, not these photos, the
Right.
video that I made. So what their dancing comes from J setting, which originated in the South anyway, like the dancing on the football on the seating area of the football stadiums. And this is Jackson State, which is a historically Black college. So there's a lot of people that do this kind of dancing in the stadium. And they were the first people to do it as trans. Well, at the time, they didn't even call themselves trans. I think now they do, but they were gender nonconforming at the time. So, yeah, but they were accepted within the African-American community in Mississippi and Alabama, believe it or not, more than the Caucasian community.
So it was like another form of almost like another form of bigotry that like just added on to it, that it was not
Yeah.
just,
I mean,
you know,
they still experience discrimination in the African-American community, but not nearly as much as,
mhm,
I mean, Alabama is a very segregated place to this
mhm.
day. They have segregated Mardi Gras in Mobile, Alabama.
Really?
Yeah. So if you're a biracial couple, you can't go to the same balls together.
Really?
Mhm.
Huh.
Yeah. So, and this is just from last week, the storm aftermath. We had that really rare derecho storm that came through and caused like crazy billions of dollars of damage. And there were hundreds of thousands of people without power. So this is just to give you an idea of like, even on the opinion desk, we still go out and cover the news. So we wrote like a column about reaction and being
Well,
one of the last communities to be without power.
no, that's an interesting thing though, too, because you gone from being a news photographer, features photographer, that now you're on the editorial staff at the Houston Chronicle. Tell us, how did you go from being a still photographer, a news photographer, to doing editorial?
That's a good question. I don't really know, actually. I came back to Houston. I went to a startup from Alabama. I went to a startup and became a DOP, a director of photography at the startup. And then that startup failed and I was laid off. And then I came back to Houston and worked at the Harris County Sheriff's Office for 3 years. And that's where this video comes from.
Okay.
And then I started doing really like documentary video at the sheriff's office, like ride-alongs with different deputies. And this happened to be like Kanye West performing in our jail, and we can show it.
Okay.
Every man, every woman, there is freedom from addiction. Jesus, you have my soul. Sunday service on the wall. All my idols, let them go. All my demons, let them know. This is a mission, not a show. This is my eternal soul.
Thank God for giving me another chance to look over my life. You know, I want to get it right this time, you know what I'm saying? And he keep continuing to bless me over and over and over.
This is a mission, not a show. This is a mission, not a show. This is our eternal soul.
We need to be firm with crime. We want our community to say everybody does, but we don't have to lose our humanity and our compassion.
I can't do it by myself. And I appreciate the group that came in with Kanye West. They inspired me to be on the other side. I don't belong on this side no more.
When I can't take it no more, I just need to stretch. Stretch my hands to you. When I can't figure it out and it seems too much on me, I stand.
Thank you, Jesus. Yes.
The presence of God began to come. It was stronger. It's like it fell up, and it was like I was being lifted up, as if, an experience I had never felt before in my life.
Oh. Yes.
that video still takes me back to that day. I don't know why I get emotional watching that. I mean, say what you will about Kanye West. I'm not a huge fan, but that was like a very special moment. That was probably as pivotal as Johnny Cash, you know, when he played in Business in California. I don't think anything like this has happened since then. And this actually, the Chronicle decided to put this on their YouTube page. They just took this and put this on their YouTube page, and it was like, it performed like crazy. So I think that had a lot to do with it. It just shows that you can do good work anywhere. You don't have to be working for a big newspaper or like a magazine, or you can work at a county agency and do good work, you know? So,
Well, it goes to show that you don't have, yeah, exactly. You don't have to do, you're not stuck to just a newspaper or a magazine.
No, and especially now when there aren't that many jobs and not that many opportunities, newspapers are struggling anyway. You might be better off working for a city or a county. I actually did feel like I was lucky and better off when I worked for the county in some ways. So I actually was pretty happy, and I probably would have stayed, but I just so happened that the people, the opinion editor and the deputy opinion editor are people I've worked with before, so they were paying attention, and they reached out to me to ask what I would recommend if they wanted to bring a visual element into the editorial board, which had never existed before.
Well, and yeah, I mean, that's an unusual thing. That's why I was saying in the beginning of this, I mean, really, you know, papers for the longest time, I mean, a visual element to editorials, that's very rarely happens.
Yeah, and I feel like they wanted to break that cycle too, because there's sort of like this ivory tower component, like you don't know who these people are, and they just, you know, opine about things from their perch, you know. Even in the newsroom, people don't really know the editorial board, you know. So they wanted to demystify that and tell and reach a wider audience, because usually the people that are reading editorials are the diehard subscribers, the people that tend to read newspapers religiously anyway. They're not your casual newspaper readers.
Yeah.
And we definitely need to reach out to younger people and meet them where they're at. And they're not necessarily going to read a polished written piece.
So what goes into doing a piece like something that's news, and maybe something like the next one that we're going to be going into? What goes into what's different between doing something that's opinion as opposed to something that, you know, is traditionally not supposed to be opinion?
Well, I feel like it's more freeing, because the truth is, when you're a journalist, you have an opinion, but you can't share it. And for me, that was like the hardest thing. Like, you have to be so neutral all the time. You can't share anything about how you feel about something. And at least on the opinion desk, you can go in and say, when you're talking, you meet a subject and they need help, or they need a certain thing to be highlighted. You can be honest and say, look, we'd like the advocacy to be this, instead of just saying, I'm here to observe. And that's it, you know.
So how did you get to this story here?
Well, this was actually a story I found. I still am working on a long-term project on the stray and loose dog problem in Houston, which is pretty bad. And I've gotten to know a lot of the rescue groups and nonprofits, and they started telling me how they've been trying to get an ordinance passed in Houston that bans puppies from puppy mills being sold at pet stores. And some cities around the country already have these bans, but it didn't exist in Houston. It certainly doesn't exist in Texas. And then they were finally able to get this ban passed in Houston. But this particular store, Petland, which is a big national chain, kept selling puppies from puppy mills for thousands of dollars. Not only is it like an inhumane practice for the animals, because they're lots of times sick when they come to the pet store, but they are doing predatory lending. So they sell these puppies for like $10,000, and they give people a line of credit with high interest rates.
You can't even a purebred puppy generally doesn't even cost.
You can go to a reputable breeder and get a dog for less money. that's going to be healthy,
Uh-huh.
you know? So it was really just a horrible, horrible company. And they still sell. They're all over Texas and Florida. The owner of this particular store has stores in Florida and all over Texas. And there's one not far from here outside of Houston. But this particular one, the Houston passed the ordinance banning puppy mill puppies, saying you can only sell rescue puppies in pet stores now in Houston. And they kept doing it. They just kept selling these puppy mill puppies for months, maybe up to a year. And finally, they were just racking up $500 tickets because that was all it was, like a $500 ticket for every time they, the animal control would go and give them a ticket. And
Well, when
just,
you're selling them for $10,000, I mean, that is a
they're
drop.
making so much money, that they just absorbed those tickets into their operating costs. But eventually, well, we can show the video and then I can say what happened.
Yeah, let's show the video.
This was a picture that stole our hearts.
Ziva, a 1-pound Maltese puppy, was lethargic in the store, but Lovey had never had a puppy before. She thought maybe she was just too young and small and she'd perk up at home.
She wasn't your normal puppy. She wasn't hopping on you like puppies do. On the way home, she started seizing at the Walmart.
To combat the puppy mill pipeline into Houston, a new city ordinance requires pet stores selling dogs to acquire those animals from humane sources, namely shelters and rescues. However, Petland in Houston is still selling dozens of commercially bred puppies.
They're continuing to do this because nobody's enforcing it. You have to enforce it.
This wasn't something we have the huge amount of bandwidth, staffing-wise, to really be aggressive with. This is more so going to be like if we're notified of a pet store operating, we can go out and respond to the call.
They're a big corporation. This has happened. They're well versed in this. This is happening to them across the country as cities write these laws and shut these down. So they know all the tricks of the trade to do it. We do not need more dogs and cats in the city of Houston.
Now, how about, I'm gonna go back to that one
So these are teasers. So these are the videos that we put on social media. And then we say, if you want to watch the full video, go to the website, and then there's a paywall. So that's hopefully how we get more subscribers.
Okay.
But we have to tease on social media. If you want to watch the full video, go to our website. And because of the full video, we exposed what Petland in Houston was doing. It created a lot more protesting in front of the store. So the rescue groups started protesting more. The city then was urged to ticket more, because I think when we did this video, they'd only given them like 4 tickets, even though the ordinance had been in place for a while. So then they increased their ticketing, and it got to a point where there were so many tickets that there was a warrant out for the arrest of the owner of the store, and he was arrested. Yeah.
So I mean, the journalism like this, I know from my point of view, when I've done stuff that had an impact, it's an incrediable feeling.
Yes, and that's the greatest thing about working on the opinion desk, is that you see those results, because you're going in with a point. You're not just going out to explore or do some sort of slice of life or something like that. Like, you're going out with a purpose. Like, you don't start the project unless you know what your advocacy sort of will be. Sometimes that changes or you add to it, but there's a mission. So.
Now, when you go out on when you go out and do videos like this, do you go out with a vision in mind, or is it like, do you let the story dictate your vision, or do you try to dictate the story, the vision?
Well, sometimes you'll have like your idea of what the advocacy is going to be, but you're surprised along the way, or you learn more. Like, I'm working on a homeless story. Houston's been lauded as, a success story with homelessness. But, and the New York Times has been here, the Washington Post, Cal Matters, like all these places, and have praised Houston. But once we started working on the story, we started to see the gaps in our own city, that it wasn't just all unicorns and rainbows, right? So then that's why that story has taken so long. Like, literally, this homeless story has been over a year, because it's so complicated. You can't just say something is a success and move on. Nothing is perfect, right? So yeah, sometimes it is harder. It's definitely harder. Yeah. This was an easy example. So obviously wrong.
Right.
But
Right. I mean,
most things are not so obvious.
right. I mean, and you know, what's the one thing that's like for journalists that's the kind of the CYAs. One of them is get the pets and the animals. But I mean, this goes to a whole nother level that it's like, I mean, you see a dog that's going through this stuff, and then you see a human that's going through this stuff, and it's almost as equal. It's almost, you know, in some ways.
Yeah, the poor animal
You know?
and this poor woman who's
Yeah.
still paying for this dog that passed away.
And
Still has to pay the debt.
And that's awful. Like, you know,
Yeah.
that we knew that dog. I mean, she didn't know that dog is from a puppy mill, but you know, I mean, they were already busted for it, and then they still keep making her pay that back. That's awful. Like,
Yeah, it is awful. And I hope somebody, I mean, that's the other thing. It's like we could have done a whole full-length documentary on the predatory lending part of it. You know, but I have to narrow my scope because I'm also a one-woman band. Like I do all the production and the finding the story, you know, the filming, the editing, everything.
And I noticed you did the voiceover on it as well.
Yeah. So I have to limit sometimes my scope. And if I have, you know, like the New York Times has a whole video team on the opinion desk. So if you look at their credits, they have like 20 or 30 people in their opinion videos.
And you have one.
Yeah. And I mean, the opinion editor, she'll help me edit my narration because she's a much better writer than I am. But yeah, you have to know what you can accomplish.
And it goes back down to editing too. It's like being able to edit your work.
Yes. Yeah. But I really enjoy this job. It's hard. It's the hardest job I've ever had. It's the perfect job for the kind of photographer that likes to ask questions. Like we were talking about that before, like the reporters that get mad at you when you ask questions. Like I was that kind of photographer. Like I was always curious, had a million questions. I wasn't like a fly on the wall, you know?
No, and really, you know, to be a good photographer and a good photojournalist, you have to ask those questions. You have to ask, you know, why are we taking the photograph?
Yes. Yeah. Why are we doing this story?
Exactly. Why are we doing the story? Finding the why in that story, and then getting that photograph. And then, I mean, you know, something like this, again, you know, you're finding the why is because, you know, it's a horrible thing that these animals are being sold. You know, they're being the inhumane conditions that, you know, these puppies are being raised in. And then you're selling it to someone who's expecting it, you know, to have this puppy that they're going to love for, you know, at least 10 years, and find out that no, this puppy has other issues.
Yeah, and this puppy died like got sick on the way home from the pet store. And she went back the next day to try to give it, that's in the full-length video, to try to bring it back, and they wouldn't take it back.
Yeah.
Or at least to even get some health care, and they wouldn't not even to her. Yeah. So it's very horrible. So, and also in a city that already has a stray and loose dog problem, like an epidemic problem, to bring in puppy mill puppies is, yeah.
This was
I meant to go to this one.
So that was an example of an editorial video, and this is an example of an op-ed, a video op-ed. So we get people that write letters, right? Letters to the opinion desk, and we publish their letters. And this is this actually turned into an editorial too. But this is this rancher who used to be a traditional rancher, and then he discovered that if he grew native plants and grasses on his property, he could actually raise happier and healthier cattle and increase his business. So instead of having these barren landscapes with like overeaten grass where he has to buy feed for his animals, he's able to raise them and cultivate the earth too without any pesticides and like the traditional ways of farming, which have been lost pretty much in Texas. So anyway, we can go ahead and watch it.
This is God's land that we're taking care of. We need to do everything that we can learn how to do to be good stewards of the land. I'm Loy Sneary, and I'm a regenerative rancher. It's different from traditional grazing. We actually move our cattle into small paddocks, and we leave those cattle there for one day. And then we move them to a new paddock where there's fresh grass, and we continue to do that in a methodical and regimented kind of way. All the pooping and peeing in a very small area, so they're fertilizing the ground as they go. The cattle are actually helping us rebuild the soil health, and the healthier our soil is, then the more carbon we're able to sequester. We've been able to increase our stocking rate by about 30%. That helps add to our bottom line. We've entered into a contract with Grassroots Carbon that monetizes the carbon that we're sequestering in the soil. So we actually get paid for doing what we think is the right thing anyway. If all of the cattle were grazed like this, enough CO2 could be sequestered that we would reduce the effects of climate change dramatically. We're going to be able to pass on a way of life, a Texas way of life, we like to say, to our kids and our grandkids and their kids for generations. This really makes us kind of underscore the fact that we are doing the right thing.
Yeah, so we got an op-ed, I think it was from him. I can't remember if it was from him or someone else talking about him, about how, more ranchers should consider this way of farming and that he had come to this evolution himself. Anyway, and we were so enchanted by it. We went to go visit. I went like a couple times, and we ended up writing our own editorial about it as well. So it turned into 3 pieces: a video component, an op-ed, and an editorial.
Well, I mean, it's a fascinating career so far, and to see some of the photographs that you've been through. Is there anyone in our live Zoom audience that would like to ask any questions of Sharon? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller. Well, you know what? I do have before we end this part of the night. First of all, I wanted to say, hey, thank you for being a part of this meeting tonight. For those of you who are seeing this on at the YouTube channel, remember, you guys can always come on and be a part of the live Zoom audience. Again, all you have to do is go over to newwritermedia.com and sign up for the membership. It's free, and you get to be a part of it. You get to ask questions as well. Sharon, how can people find your stuff?
I have a website. It's my first Sharon Steinmann, SharonSteinmann.com. So sorry.
And we're,
or I don't really put a lot of the work that I do at the Houston Chronicle. So the best way then is to go to YouTube, go to Houston Chronicle, and we have our own channel, the editorial board channel.
And for those who are catching this on YouTube, the links will be in the notes. So
yeah,
that's
the best way. A lot of it's political though. So a huge part of what I do are around the elections, and we do a lot of screenings. We bring in politicians and we screen them, and I film that too. So it's a big variety.
So let's go into the final 5. These are questions that I ask of everyone that comes in, and these are like the 5 final questions. It's kind of inspired by inside the actor studio. It's inspired, but there's maybe 1, 2 maybe that are kind of taken from it. But so when you're on assignment, what quote, saying, thought that keeps you motivated when you're on your assignments?
Well, it's a little different for me because I don't go to assignments blindly anymore. Like I kind of know what I'm getting into, but I guess the most important for me, I spend a lot of time in the office thinking about how I'm going to do something before I go. It's different, not straight up photojournalism. So I guess for me, I just tell myself to go. Like if I get stumped and I'm not really quite sure what the story is, I just go there. I'm not doing quick turnaround, so it's that's how I decide what the story is.
What are the things you like to see the most?
What do I like to see? My kids. That's another reason I really like this job, because I did, traditional photojournalism for so long that I can't even imagine being a mom. I have a 6-year-old and 8-year-old, and I've never worked on a photo staff with another mother with young children ever. Yeah.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
It's an industry that's kind of hard to have a family in.
Especially as a mom. Like I worked with a lot of men who had children and their wives are like teachers or the types of jobs where they could really fill the gaps, always be there for drop off and pick up and do all those things. But I've never actually seen a woman do that in a photo staff before. So
what is your favorite thing to hear?
My kids, I guess. I guess my favorite sound is the ocean. I really miss that. I'm from Southern California. I'm from Redondo Beach, and I miss seeing and smelling and hearing the ocean every day.
What is your favorite word?
When my kids call me mama. Yeah.
I'm betting I know the answer to this last question, but when I ask it anyway. If heaven exists, what does it look like to you?
Well, yeah, everybody I love would be there. That's my vision of what heaven would be. That you would see the little light at the end of the tunnel, and you get to the end of the tunnel, and it's everybody you love, including all your pets.
That's one of the things I wouldn't mind seeing. It's like all my pets coming back.
I know all my pets.
I know
They have to, yeah.
I
All
can
my
see.
pets.
I have a few dogs in there that I'm like would probably be like, oh, you're here.
Yeah, exactly.
But Sharon, thank you so much for being my guest tonight. And for those of you, make sure you subscribe to this to the YouTube channel and check us out. And until we got someone coming up in the next 2 weeks, and we have Doug McSchuler coming up in our next meeting. So make sure you guys subscribe, come and sign up, and be a part of this ever growing meeting, and be a part of our community. For National Storytellers Night, I'm Doug. See you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Doug. It was fun.
Check this out.